Thomas Pickering is a former United States ambassador to both Russia and the United Nations. Mr. Ambassador, welcome. Let me ask you, first of all, how does this crisis compare to what you've seen in your long career as a diplomat?
This is certainly the largest and most dangerous crisis, in large measure because it risks a massive conflict in Europe, which has not yet taken place and which NATO and the U.S. are trying to guard against. But the recent threat by President Putin by raising his nuclear alert status is, of course, another very dangerous move in this particular question. President Trump did not quite the same thing, but did talk about nuclear weapons as if they were there, ready to be used anytime.
How much more pressure can the international community apply to President Putin to stop any further action from Russia?
If they expect to do that, to achieve that goal, a very difficult one, then more pressure, I think, will have to be applied, particularly in the energy sector, which is very complicated. But the U.S. and others will have to provide more energy to friends and allies in Europe if indeed the Russian export of energy to Europe is shut down as part of an effort to begin to deny President Putin of the financial value, which is huge, of his oil and gas exports. And they will also, in my belief, have to understand that subsidization of oil prices, certainly of U.S. oil and gas to Europe, will be at least an immediate necessity to make, in fact, the oil pressure valuable, succinct, and effective.
Do you believe there is any more room for diplomacy, or is that chapter simply exhausted?
I think there has to be, because short of more room for diplomacy, the situation is such that there are only two alternatives to this conflict. One, the side conducting the conflict backing down, and that doesn't seem likely or possible, and diplomacy would then be needed to set the terms of the back down. The other is obviously a wider, more massive, and indeed more damaging conflict, including the potential risk of nuclear weapons, and by accident or miscalculation, that turning into some kind of a more general conflict. Not happy predictions, and diplomacy at least keeps the door open. Diplomacy is not a perfect result, particularly in a very difficult situation like this, but ought to be fully exhausted before other more warlike alternatives are undertaken to deal with the problem.
As you alluded to, Russia's president has already ordered the country's nuclear deterrent to be put on high alert. Do you believe this is simply dangerous bluff or something far darker?
One doesn't know, and with President Putin, given his characteristic marriage to uncertainty, we must in all cases be prepared to deal with the worst result rather than to spend our time doing little and hoping for the best.
Thomas Pickering, the former United States ambassador to Russia and the United Nations, thank you very much for talking to us.